I know it's a little bit laggy, always in the beginning. I don't know why that is, but welcome back to another video, another channel. I keep saying channel. I don't know why I do that. We'll just welcome back to another video. We're going to be talking about absolute values and square roots today and how to graph them given a original function. But again, let's start with a joke. Okay, why do crabs never give to charity? Because they're shellfish. Get it? Shellfish. Saltfish. Okay. So again, what I said about today was we're going to look at absolute values and square roots and how they affect the graph. In particular, take a look at these ones here. Okay. We're going to find out what happens if we take the absolute value of a function, if we take the absolute value of x of a function, if we take the absolute value of y equals our function, the square root of our function, and also what happens if we square the y of our original function. Y squared equals to fx. So let's take a look at these and let's see how these will kind of graph. Now, this is kind of a bit of a fun one. It's kind of less mathy and more just kind of like remembering a couple concepts and kind of translating it. So only for this first one have I written out how we sketch it out, or I'm going to show you how we sketch it. So we're given fx equals to x minus 1, x plus 4. Now that there I know is going to be a parabola because I'm going to have maximum in x squared. The x squared is going to be positive, so I know it's concave up. And I know it's going to cut at +1 for the x-axis and -4 for the other x-axis. So that's what our curve is going to look like. Now, what they'll do is they'll say, okay, therefore, if that's fx, sketch y equals the absolute value of our fx. And so what I've written here up there in the red, oh, you know what? All these other ones are red. I'm going to change this to red as well. So change that to red, and I'm going to leave that little blue one there just to annoy all of you. And I'm going to work in blue today. Okay, so what happens is I'm still going to cut at the same, I'm still going to cut at the same places, because if I take the absolute value of the positives, it's still going to be positive, right? So that means at 1, it's still going to be positive. At -4 on this side here, I'm still kind of exactly the same. Nothing changes there. The only difference now is all that stuff that was kind of, I guess, underneath is not underneath anymore because we're taking the absolute value of it. So if it, if it's supposed to come out negative, it now pops up as positive. So what's nice here, and if you can see what I've written in the red, all it's going to do is it's going to reflect anything below the x-axis to above. So that would be our absolute value of fx here. Okay, boom. Hopefully that's making a bit of sense. Anything below, reflected up. There's only so many ways I can say it. Okay, now let's take a look at another example. So I've got a different parabola this time, but this time I'm just taking y equals the absolute value, or y equals the function of the absolute value of x. Okay, so that means technically anything that's going to be on this side here, anything that's going to be on the left-hand side, all those negative x values now become positive x values. So what that means graphically is we're just going to reflect against the y-axis. So we're going to keep the right-hand side. The right-hand side is sweet. Positive x is all good. All right, so if I take a look here, it'll look a little bit like this. So it's kind of going to, that's what it would have looked like on the right-hand side. But then all we're going to do here is we're going to reflect it on the left-hand side as well, because we're taking the absolute value of x here. So everything that was positive, and that should be somewhat symmetrical. And that's that. So that's what happens when you take just the absolute value of x within the function. Cool. Now, moving on. Next one. Okay, this one's a slightly tricky one here. Now, this one here is if you have the absolute value of y equals to fx. So all that means here is, think of it this way. We're going to reflect everything above the x-axis. We're going to reflect that to below, okay? But we never had any negative y's, because when you have the absolute value of y, it's always going to be positive. So the way that we're going to do this is we're going to delete everything under the x-axis, and everything on top now gets reflected down to the bottom. So let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to start with this thing here. Above axis, still good. I'm going to delete all this stuff here. That does not get drawn in. Okay, now this stuff here does. It's not a great drawing, but that's that. So now I've drawn everything that's above the x-axis. And because it's the absolute value of y, that means I get technically the positive and negative of it. It now reflects underneath. So it's going to end up looking like this. Okay. So this is a bit of a tricky one. If you ever see the absolute values on the y, I want you to delete everything under the x-axis, and then whatever's left, reflect that across the x-axis. Okay. All right. Now let's talk about some square roots. Why was the plant upset? Because it had square roots. So we've got y equals the square root of a function. Now, what we do here is, your best bet here is to use some sort of table of values. Okay. That's the first thing here, because we want to take the square root of everything. Also, it makes sense that if we ever have any negative or anything negative under the square root, put that in the calculator, square root of -1, you're going to get a math error. So what we're going to do here is anything under the x-axis, we delete. Everything on top is still going to work. So if I take a look here, I can see that this value here is 1. What's the square root of 1? Square root of 1 is still 1. Okay, and let's move here. Or let's do this part here. Square root of 0, just 0. Square root of 4 is going to be 2. Okay, square root of 4 is going to be 2. Let's go back to this one here. The square root of 1 is just going to be 1 again. Square root of 0 is going to be 0. Square root of 1 again is going to be 1 again. And then it's going to approach 4. So in other words, it's going to approach 2. So that there. Okay, so I'm going to say that's 2. This is going to be maybe -2 minus 1, 1, 2, 3. And so what happens here is if I draw my graph, it should look a little bit like this. It'll go up, it'll go down, it'll go up again, very, very similar, but now it's just everything's been taken the square root of. Yeah. So instead of topping out at 4, we now top out at 2 because that's the square root of 4. And nothing exists under here because negative square roots or negatives under the square root, so to speak, don't exist. Okay, now the last one, which is kind of an interesting one, is if we have a y squared. And I'm using the same graph here from before so you can kind of see. So if I take y squared of fx, it's very, very similar to having the absolute value of the square root of fx. It's the same thing. So what's going to happen is we know that when we square or when we absolute value the y, it reflects the top and the bottom, just the parts that were positive. Okay, so let's take the square root first. We'll square root everything similar to before. It's going to look a little, it's not what I wanted. It's going to look a little bit like this. Right, it's going to go down, it's going to go up, and it's going to peak out at 2. So that's what it would have looked like. But now we are going to reflect it this way. Right, so it's going to peak at -2. So if that was 2 there, that would be -2. You're going to go back, cut at 0. And then it's going to approach 2, but never reach it, -2 in the bottom half. So it's just your square root, but we flip it and reflect it across the x-axis again. Yeah, so that would be that. And that is it. Most of the exercise questions will be, they'll give you a function, hence sketch the absolute value or the absolute value of the function of x, or the absolute value of the x within the function, or the absolute value of y equals the function. And they're just going to ask you all these different things and maybe a mix of a couple. But these are the general principles. These are the general rules. If you kind of remember them, it'll be sweet. Cool. So hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys another time. See you later. Bye.